Hello, welcome back to Class here in Organizational Communication or Communicating at Work. Today, Chapter 7 is on tap from our textbook, Identity and Difference in Organizational Life. I'll pause here a minute and say if you've got the red textbook by the same title and authors, the older edition, this is where the book radically departs. We've skipped a whole chapter, and I hope everybody has this current edition. I'm going to stop recommending the older edition at this point. All right, identity and difference in organizational life. Here we have a picture of a guy. He's wearing multiple hats. And that actually might be a good metaphor to describe what goes on in our worlds, that we do play many roles. Of course, each hat represents a role. Hats represent professions. They can represent your the kind of individual in society and your friendships that you want to be. They represent any number of things, but yeah, we do wear multiple hats, and that's an idea I hope you've got a grasp on already in your life. Shakespeare said it, all the world's a stage, and you can just start teasing out the ramifications of that if you like. We play different roles at work, at home, with friends, in a job interview, in a social club we belong to, in an activist organization we belong to, in politics, in love. We do play many roles. Okay, so probably the primary question of this chapter is, what makes you who you are? Here we got some interesting people to look at here, from the woman that can change her hair, her makeup, her appearance. The face is the same. We got the cowboy with the hat, and he's got the toothpick there, perhaps a more millennial type fellow with his glasses, wearing his tie. He's probably at work with the coat on, and I don't know if I'd call him a geek. We've got the cheerleader, we've got the gangbanger, we've got the old hippie. Looks like a pretty rough character. I've worked with a lot of guys like that in my life, and typically very interesting stories to go with those faces. Have the goth woman there with her dressed all in black, and then the next guy, not sure where he's coming from or headed, with his hyperbolized gauges, and a lot of people have tattoos like that. And then our final guy, dressed up, I don't know, looking like a pit bull as much as anything else. I'm not sure, and we choose these clothes, we choose this makeup, we choose to then behave according to these. It's an interesting process. I probably first came across this really in my face when I quit the construction trades and went back to college at age 28, I think, I don't remember, age 29. And my first day at Phoenix College, I hadn't been to college since 1977, and here it was, I think 1989. And I was in college again, walking around the campus of PC. I'd been there many times. My dad was a teacher there. He taught art at Phoenix College for a couple of decades in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s, I think, before he retired. And there I was, a student now, walking around, and I hadn't been a college student in a very long time, and I was really enjoying walking across campus in that spring semester in the sunshine and that beautiful Arizona air in late January, and not at some construction site trudging around in work boots, getting dirty, installing pipes and pulling wires and all the things that electricians do, and ruining my body in one sense, really, just by wearing it out. And later on, after college, 4 years later, 3 years later, I graduated, and I decided, I'm going to go back into the electrical trade for a year, and I'm going to earn my 10th year of service in the union so I can get a pension one day. If you don't have 10 years, you don't get anything. And so I went back to the union hall and went out to work, and ended up out in Albuquerque as a traveler. We call them tramps, tramping around the country, following jobs, chasing the overtime jobs to make as much money as you can with your wife and family back at home. And I wanted to get in as many hours and make as much money as I could, and so out to Albuquerque we went to work at Intel. And I think it was that first day at Intel, right out of college, and I'm walking across the second floor of the building, and it had plywood everywhere covering up everything, and you could just feel the plywood bouncing under your feet, and I'm wearing my jeans and my boots and dressed like an electrician, and it was just so comfortable. I had been that for so long. It was a very comfortable identity. I knew exactly how to act and how to be. I struggled more when I got into graduate school at Syracuse and at the University of Memphis, and I had to kind of reinvent myself and get the long black trench coat up there in Syracuse. They're very practical in a rainy, snowy environment just to keep you warm. I used to wear snow boots to walk into school, but I kept a nice pair of dress shoes under the desk and always tried to dress up and have a tie often and really be somebody else. I was learning how to be a professor, how to perform that identity, how to change hats, if you will, from the baseball cap to the tam. Got one hanging right up there. I should have grabbed it for you. And that's when I really became aware, I think, in a very practical sense, about identity and difference in organizational life. I could be two different people in two very different fields, two different careers, and I still grapple with that at age 57 here, up on top of a roof, installing a roof on a little, restoring an old house down in Camp Verde, and then here at a lecture out in Lexington, Kentucky, talking to a group of graduate students. The professor, the construction worker, both those identities are still in there. I probably have some others, the musician, the artist, the writer, whatever I decide to be that day. The identities flow out pretty easily. I don't know, we wear 70 hats like one of our researchers says in various roles, but we definitely have various identities that we perform every day. So identity, we define it as how individuals position themselves in the world through language and action. Notice the next statement, I wrote this in. Identity is not genetic. Language and action, hey, the way we talk, the kinds of things we say, we shape ourselves through language. Language is like programming for the brain. Grammar is so powerful. I'm just more and more impressed with how strong grammar is as a shaping mechanism. So the things we say, the things we do are what positions us in this world. And a lot of influences go into that. But don't think for a minute I was born who I am and I've always got to be this way. Well, maybe your personality is like that. You're an outgoing person, or you're somebody that just everything has to be perfect and your desk is always neat, and my desk isn't, but when I write, and I hate all the typos that I leave and everything. It drives me crazy and I go nuts trying to find them all. So there are parts of my personality that have to be perfect in my world. Other people just want to be in control of everything, and often they're pretty darn good at controlling things too. And then there's other people who just want to get along with everybody, and we all have, now these are kind of the four main personality types, but don't confuse personality with identity, because you can be from any number of professions with that professional identity, yet have any one of those kinds of personalities that kind of shines through. So it's not genetic, it really is about how we position ourselves in the world through language and action. Now here's a interesting concept the book mentions by this writer, Kenneth Gergen, and I read this book back in graduate school and really enjoyed it. Multiphrenia, the condition largely attributed to technologies that increase social contact, of being simultaneously drawn in multiple and conflicting directions. And Kenneth Gergen goes on to talk about we really have a problem when who I am in one realm of my life, my professional life, I go out on the town and I run into other people that didn't expect me to be that or something, and we have different audiences for our various roles, different groups of friends, different social networks we're part of, and when we're wearing the wrong hat with the wrong people, it can be very uncomfortable here. Multiphrenia is what he calls this. But Gergen goes on to say, and he's working with some of the research from John Gottman, I believe, about the roles we play in life, parent, child, employee, maybe a supervisor someplace else. I don't know, I've had struggled with that also when during my period of changing careers and starting at a new job and being used to being a supervisor on construction projects, and I go into a new job and I'm back at the bottom of the hierarchy then and struggling with that role and trying to preserve my dignity while everybody tells me what to do and sets my hours for me. Okay, the book has 7 images of identity here, and I'm going to, it's on page 198. There's a nice little chart there. We'll just quickly go through these. This self-doubter identity, and this is a person coping with insecurity, uncertainty, not quite sure who you are in any one given situation, finding yourself. A great story in the book about these, where this test, these potential leaders were given at an organization, was at Microsoft, and really put through the ringer, and a lot of them quit and walked away, and they were really just trying to push these people to the limit to determine who could advance in the company. Fascinating story. I think we all, with this idea of self-doubting, especially as we're young going into a new field, how do I fit in? Who am I? Am I going to survive here? Is it going to work? And these questions are part of us. I normally don't like lists of 7 items that all start with the letter S, although they can be useful at times, and we'll have another one later in the semester for one of our final assignments. Okay, next is this struggler. It's when you have conflicts between yourself and between external demands. Having some self-dignity and having to take a job where you're given the dirty work, and you're just, how comfortable are you at that? Can you do this? You're challenged by this. You need the job. You want to break into this career, but you have to start at the bottom. Like me, being a supervisor at one point in my career in construction, and then becoming a graduate student at Syracuse University, a first-year teaching assistant, and I enjoyed the experience. It was exciting, but all of a sudden I was at the bottom of the hierarchy in the academic department, and even after 2 years it only worked up 1 level higher. Well, I knew it was part of the big picture, and it was the road to become a professor one day. A surfer, I kind of like this one, the person that just goes from identity to identity as they need to. They're good at creating these identities, and maybe they're not completely this or completely that. And I had to really negotiate that 1 year at the University of Memphis, where I took an electrical job for the summer. The boss really liked me, and summer school came around for 6 weeks, and the boss allowed me to come in late every day and only work 6 hours a day. And so I would go to the university 7 a.m. and teach public speaking. And I would be wearing my professor's clothes, or I was I think a 3rd-year PhD student then. And then as soon as class was out at 8 o'clock, I went outside, got in my Chevy conversion van from the 70s, and changed into my blue jeans and a work shirt, and put on my boots, and then drove to the job site and stepped out of the van as the construction worker, really surfing from one identity to the next. And it works. Some of you do that. Some of you are seeing yourself here already. Storyteller. And this has more to do with telling yourself a story about who you are that really fits. And I probably did a little bit of that even going through graduate school. It's okay that I'm the 1st-year teaching assistant at Syracuse. This is part of the path that I'm on, and it will change every year. It will change a little bit more until I'm finally in a professor's position, which I was 5 years later, and it was very, I had to get used to students coming into my office and sitting down and treating me with respect. And prior to that, just in fact 3 months earlier at the University of Memphis as a grad student, students would come into my office and, I'm just another TA. And really didn't have a whole lot of respect for me there. So it was interesting to see that shift. But telling myself that story that we're shifting all the way through this. Okay, the strategist. And I've done a bit of this myself also in trying to dress like the professor, trying to change myself and become something that I wasn't before. Synthesizing, and yeah, the authenticity issue there, you don't necessarily feel you are that yet. You do feel it as you become that, and the longer you work in that position, in that career, in that field, at that organization, the more you become. And the real strategist takes concrete steps to shape themselves into somebody that will fit in with that organization. The stencil here being shaped or drawn by powerful forces or people or dominant discourses. And I'm going to combine that with the next one, the soldier here. And where that happened to me, I recall at age 18, I was in the start of the electrical apprenticeship, went to 1 year of college, and then the next, at the end of the school year, in the summer, I started an electrical apprenticeship. And there was 18, I was an apprentice electrician, and going out to the job site, and I didn't dress the right way. I didn't drive the right kind of car. Some of the guys that I knew had fathers in the union. Of course, my dad was a hippie artist, so I really didn't even fit in from the start there. But I had to go out and buy some blue jeans to wear all the time, because you're supposed to wear blue jeans in the electrical union, even though I was more comfortable in those khaki work pants. And finally, 10 years later, I just started wearing those because they're not so hot. But at that time, I had to fit the stencil. I had to become. And one day, I walked, I was there about 2 months into my apprenticeship, and I didn't know it, but I was on the bubble. They were about to wash me out. And I went out to work with a guy who needed some help, another part of the company. And he told me later that if I didn't work out with them, they were going to fire me. But I showed up the first day, and I remember, his name was Mike. Mike walked up to me, and he looked me up and down. It's 7 a.m. on a job site in North Phoenix, wiring houses. Looked me up and down, looked at my tool belt, looked at the way I was dressed, and I was beginning to fit in a little bit better by this time. And he reached over, and he started rearranging the tools in my tool belt. And he said, "There." These were the first words he spoke to me. "Leave them just like this. Don't rearrange them. This is the most efficient way to have your tools in your tool belt." And over the next couple of months, he really treated me like a fresh recruit, and he was the drill sergeant, teaching me the trade, teaching me how to work efficiently and do things well. And he really did my career there a big favor. But I literally had to look like him and be like him and walk like him, and it's kind of an interesting situation. And yet at the same time, it's what I needed to survive in that environment. He shaped me in a very large way. Today, when I strap on a tool belt and go over to a friend's house and do some electrical troubleshooting for him, my tools are still arranged in that same order. The soldier, finally, and as I got enmeshed in the electricians union, there we were. That's not my picture, but that is so typical of the electricians union. Just all these pictures of 20 or 30 men, 15 men, now women, Hispanics, blacks, it's a very inclusive organization these days. It's opened its doors as much as anybody has. All wearing the hard hats, all wearing the jackets, all looking alike, all acting alike. And you really are one of the rank and file. You are a member of the union first, part of the team, and not an individual. And the guys that just wouldn't conform, who wouldn't be individuals, just didn't make it that long and ended up getting washed out. Okay, moving on here. Gendered identities, the next section the book covers. And one theory says your identity in terms of gender is biological, and yes, you have a male body or you have a female body. Some people have a condition known as Klinefelter syndrome, where you have attributes of both bodies, from just the shape of your bones and physical structure to genitalia. And but those are rare. 3 out of 1,000, something like that, 1 out of 1,000 people. I don't know what the incident rate is. But most of us are born either male or female. So there's, to some extent, biological shaping goes into gendered identity. And we teach, we have a whole chapter or two on this in our gender and communication class. There's actually 8 different theories that go into forming you into the gendered person you are as an adult. And these theories, the younger you are, the more biology is probably involved. As you are born and born into a family, then we have some shaping theories by others shaping you, dressing you in blue or pink. Girls do this, boys do that. And then going through school, we have social learning theories. It's the other one I've named here. We learn how to perform our gender. And then finally, at some point, age 13, 14 for some, age 17 or 18 for others, we have a number of theories that come in. Standpoint theory is probably the main one, where you start looking around and saying, hey, wait a minute, this is who I want to be. We have gender performance. I'm going to be this kind of person. I've been watching my daughter go through this whole process the last few years as she became very aware of feminist issues in our society, and she was not happy with it and wanted to be more masculine in many ways, and has, I think at age 22, finally settled into an identity she's comfortable with. But she shaped herself through this much of the way through. Professors and teachers and mentors do a little shaping there, but I think the older you get, the more that drops away. Deborah Tannen's work has been very helpful for helping us not in how we get shaped into somebody, but how we interact with others after a lot of that shaping has already occurred. And what she explains here is that males, masculine people, tend to have a hierarchically ordered space that they live in. I've got this upper picture here that shows a hierarchy. And you find your place in that, you establish your place. We struggle, two people want the promotion, only one's gonna get it. We work hard to position ourselves and hold that position in the hierarchy. That's why men are always trying to one-up each other. And even if things are going wrong, oh, I had a bad day, oh, your day was nothing, wait till you hear about mine. We gotta always one-up each other. I'm always just one better than you. And it's playful in some ways, but in other ways, it's really not. And it's just, and men do try to find that place in the hierarchy where they're comfortable, where they're accepted. And you can see these layers, and I'm equal with everybody else in this hierarchical world of Northern Arizona University, and we have hierarchies of professors, and I'm a lecturer, I'm not a professor. And so I'm equal with the other professors. Yet, back at Indiana University, I was an endowed professor with tenure. And so my colleagues here recognize my past and afford me perhaps a little more respect and responsibility than they would have had I been right out of graduate school hiring in as a lecturer. But we have this hierarchy here of men and women even. And it's very formal in the university. Feminine people, women, typically have this web of connections that they live in. And it's not so much about hierarchy, it's about being connected people, having a network, having as many connections to help people as you can. And what changes here is our communication patterns are actually determined by these two orientations toward life. And if you like, you can look at these not in terms of men and women, but in terms of masculine and feminine, if that helps. I have yet to see a true other gender, and some people will disagree with me there, but I've been reading the research about this a lot, and I see a lot of women that would prefer to be men, men that would prefer to be women, people that think they're in the wrong body, but not a third option. There are people that don't want to be either gender. My wife was very much like this when she was a teenager. 3 older brothers, fireman background in the family, very masculine family, and she's the first girl to come along. And she didn't want to be a woman. She knew she wasn't a man. She just didn't want to be either. But it's not a true different identity in that sense in terms of gender. But these two orientations, hierarchy, or that's a hard word to say, or networks. And feminine people tend to focus on these networks. Now, men have networks like this as well, just as women have their hierarchies. But which one gets emphasized in your social world? That's the critical question here. We'll be writing a little bit about this in one of our assignments. Okay, I'm going to write here, wrong way here. All right, even organizations have identities here. Organizations can be gendered. The identity of these organizations, they guide interaction. The electricians union I belong to, a very masculine type organization, and it guided interaction as to it's very hierarchical with different ranks of pay and experience. You are expected to stay in your place and not try to push against the boundaries unless time and experience and the system have moved you up into the higher ranks. And yeah, it predisposes you to certain behaviors and it rewards people who do things the right way. But any organization does this that you can work in to one degree or another. So they're gendered. Some take on a more feminine approach to doing business. Others are more masculine, more competitive perhaps. But each organization is like this. And your organization is part of what shapes your organizational, your professional identity as you graduate from college and get into that career position, or even as you're a younger person still in college, working wherever you can to make a living. Your organization is starting to shape you, and it does its best to form you in certain ways. Our culture also shapes us, defines our identity through these popular cultural narratives. I thought the book used a very good one discussing airline pilots, and it follows the evolution of the identity of an airline pilot right up to the conscious shaping of that identity by the airlines as they became larger corporations, and everybody wanted to know you had a very professional, safe pilot at the helm here with your life in their hands, the expertise, rather than the World War II daredevil pilot that could take a plane anywhere. I had a friend that used to practice flying his plane right on top of the clouds when he was in military training, and then when he would fly his plane around southern Arizona, he'd go down low, 10 feet off the ground, 15 off the ground. Just kind of did he have a death wish? I don't know. Very interesting person. But our culture helps us define our identities. Culture tells you what a professor ought to look like here. Another way is through the consumption, through the items we use. Some people just have to have the brand name clothes, have to have the latest gadgets, have to have the latest phone, the latest tablet, whatever it is. Here we have Bob Marley with his Les Paul guitar. And when I was a musician back in the 70s, that's what we all wanted, all us young teenagers. We wanted a Les Paul, because that's what Robert Plant with Led Zeppelin played one of those, and everybody had a Les Paul, and there were a few other brands that were acceptable. But for a couple of years there in the mid-70s, it was the Les Paul you had to have, or you're nothing, you know. And I think I see less of that today in musicians. People play whatever they can, and it's more about musicianship. But consumption, crafting your identity through things, through clothes, through objects, through your car. How many guys are compensating for something with that big high truck with the big fat tires and bull testicles hanging from the trailer hitch? Their identity coming through the car, then through the hat that they wear, through the clothes that they wear, and that turns right into your swagger as you walk around. Personal branding is another form of identity, and you know, I don't know, Dr. J here, that just kind of evolved, and here I am, an online teacher, and I had this identity back at Indiana University as well, an online teacher, Dr. J, and a couple of my students just started calling me that, and you know, I thought, why not embrace it? Hey, I liked basketball too, and used to play. So Dr. J it was. It fits with Jerome and the doctor part, and it's worked. People remember me, and I think I teach my classes in a certain way that is different than a lot of other professors. And after 5 years of doing this at IU online, I knew when I took the position at NAU, this will be successful. I can give up tenure at IU because I know this way of teaching works. And my students tell me they like it and they keep signing up for anything I teach in some cases. And so I knew I won't have to worry about low enrollment in my classes and people wondering if they should cut my contract for next year. I figured student demand will keep me going, and through this mild form of personal branding, we've done that. A lot of celebrities certainly brand themselves very consciously, but people do it in organizations as well. Creating yourself into something that has that brand aspect to it, that people can instantly place you and say you're a useful person to this organization. Okay, so identity. What makes you who you are? This concept of agency. Where is agency? An agent is somebody that does something. A secret agent does things in secret, but they're active. They're creating action. And agency, when it comes to identity, where is it? Well, who has agency? I think you do, in large degree, especially as an adult. If you want it, if you want to shape yourself into something, do it. You can do this. Find out what, be that strategist if you like here. Tell yourself the story that you need. A great story about, was it Bud Goodall at the end of the chapter, who told the story about himself as a cancer survivor to himself and living with cancer, and it just helped him cope. Whatever this is, you have a lot of shaping power if you want it. If not, you'll be like the stencil getting turned into a soldier like I was at age 18 with this large organization, an international brotherhood, that turned me into something. It molded me, it transformed me from that artist's kid with the long hair in the 1970s to a young apprentice electrician with the short hair, and even started wearing cowboy boots and a cowboy hat at one point. Either way, you're going to be molded by something. Your employer can do it, your career, your trade, or you can do it, or a combination of both is most likely. I'm a professor to these days, or a lecturer, and I can't create an identity for myself that's too far outside of what professors ought to be and what we expect of professors. So there's even some institutional molding still shaping me here at age 57 in the last couple of decades of my career. Okay, thanks for listening and watching. I hope this all makes sense, and I've got the red book there. I hope you don't have this book still. Hope this all makes sense and that you recognize that you're not born with an identity. You get shaped and molded into it, and I think wise people take over that shaping as soon as you can and do a lot of that shaping and molding yourself, even from a very strategic perspective. But your personality,